Imainaya Kashkanki, Ñuqapa sutigmi Venuca Evanan.
Hello, everybody. How are you? My name is Venuca Evanan, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background and my proposals. Here are my parents, Primitivo Evanan Poma, pioneer disseminator of the art of the Sarwa boards, and my mother, Valeriana Vivanco Espinosa, also one of the first women to disseminate this artistic expression. As I told you, my name is Venuca Evanan. I am currently 34 years old and I have been involved in Sarino art for more than 18 years. I inherited it from my parents. They migrated to the city of Lima here in Peru and they formed the Association of Artists of Sarwa, where it was a learning space for the children of the Saruino people, the painters who here in the city, who migrated to the city. So that was my training center in the association. And here I'm showing a board that I made where I'm mixing painting and textile. And in the back, you can see in the image some paintings that show the problems of the Sarinos in the capital. This is the Sarwa community. It's a small village at 3,200 meters above sea level. I'm in Ayacucho in the province of Victor Fajardo. And in the community, they have a tradition that until now remains, which is to paint boards with the family history. And you receive it as a gift when you build a new house. And it is placed on the roof of the house. As here you can see the Sarwa boards, original size, 2, 3, 4 meters on wild logs painted with natural dyes with bird feathers. And as you can see here on my right side, it is placed on the roof. So we have the gable roof and it's placed inside and it has this part over here that represents the rainbow. So the visual reading of a traditional Sarwa board is from the bottom up. So first is the dedication, the patron saint of the community, close family, and as you go up, you see distant family, and it ends with the Inti Sol or Inti Sun. And here I show a little bit of the material that we use so far, which is natural soil, natural colored soil that we extract from the surrounding area or the community in the hills. And the bird feather can be of condor, duck, chicken, and these are the tools that we use until now to portray our ideas. And here, if I'm not mistaken, I was 27 years old and I was beginning to see how the proposals of the Sarwa boards go with my innovation. And in this case, I used a natural trunk of the kabuya, as we call it here, and I captured the genealogy. Well, here I'm showing the story of Christmas and how they celebrate it in the community. I mixed colored soil and sand because I live in Chorrillos, where we have the beach. So I mixed both those materials, and I also continue to propose textile art, which is composed of natural dyes, and there's also sheep's wool, and at the other end we see the genealogy of Jesus. And I placed it on the roof as they traditionally go in the houses of the community in Sarwa. As you can see, it's accompanied here with the icho roof, the straw roof. And those are the first contests that I participated in, and I was also a finalist with other artisans from Peru. And after participating in contests and competitions, and after having learned the tradition of the Sarwa boards, I asked myself, why don't I also make art in the streets? Because not everyone goes to galleries or to fairs to look at works of art. But the streets have a more direct contact with all kinds of people that are interested in art. So that's how I started painting murals supported by painters in Peru. And we made a fusion of each artist's proposal. So we had a French, a Peruvian, and a Sarina artist. And on the other side, I went to the Pensacola Art Museum with the historian Gabriela Germana, my father, and my sister Valeriana. And we went there, and I also proposed to her, why don't we do murals on the facade of the art museum? So we began to paint these representations of the flora of Sarwa and also representations of women's skirts. And there you can see me painting myself in the Andean landscape and making a sarwa board of my journey to Pensacola. I also like to keep trying with different materials, so I talked to a fashion designer where we worked and tried to portray the story of the association and how my father, with so much effort, has made this Peruvian art be recognized. Then I planned a horizontal sarwa board to show the story of all of this, all of these garments. And here are my proposals. In 2018, I began to inquire and to wonder. It was also one of my first exhibitions in a gallery. I was already moving from a craft center or craft fairs to art galleries. In this case, it was this foundation that opened the doors for me. And with Arlina's work here, it was also one of the first contemporary art fairs that I participated in. It was interesting to meet contemporary conceptual artists. I also did my self portrait and then I continued to investigate and thought, what would be missing on these Sarwa boards? So I began to portray the lives of women, above all, of migrant women and Sarwina women, of the struggle of these women to find that respect and that value that they deserve. There is a lot of machismo, sexism, violence, which is normalized and it still prevails. So I try to focus on that, and that's what I'm doing nowadays. There I portrayed Maria Parado de Bellido, a woman who helped in the independence of Peru, and I also depicted her here in the upper part in black and white, which is inspired by the first monochromatic Sarwa boards. My neighborhood and how the Sarwinos come to the capital but don't lose their customs, and that's what we're trying to show here. And the other part is my cousin, who's Sarwina. She doesn't have hands or feet, but she paints with her mouth and represents us in the Para-Pan American Games. These are paintings that show the strength of women. And here you can see that I continue with the spaces, with the contests. I participated in the VCR painting contest. I was a finalist with Las Guarayo, which represents the authority of women in the community. So far, there are no Guarayo women. There are only Guarayo men. So these are men who assume positions of authority. But I wondered why in these times there are no Guarayo women. Instead of them being in the kitchen, why can't their voices be heard? Why can't they contribute? And the other is a story of a woman, a doll called Puta Fina. That is her name in the community. And during Carnival, a woman who takes on a role or a position and is called a campona, she holds the doll in her hand and shows it and makes the men kiss her mouth and buttocks. This is a story of a shepherdess who was innocent and very beautiful, but who was outraged and mistreated. And as a vindication in Carnival, this is carried out to remember the sad story and at the same time vindicate the Sarwina shepherdess. And these last ones I painted before the pandemic. My friends here in the capital motivate me to do this type of work. These women asked me, why don't you paint my story? And these women are lesbians, and I was a bit scared because I had never painted that before, but then I said, let's go, let's give it a try. So I painted their love story, I organized it, put it all together, and that was the first homosexual themed Sarwa board that's ever been made. And as you can see, for example, there are two trunks that form the shape of a uterus, and on it we can see the erotic life of the Saruinos and Saruinas, and at the same time how rape of women is normalized. So that's what I wanted to capture. And then again, not only do I like to express my ideas, but I also like to transmit, portray. So here I posted a photo of how I transmit what I've inherited from my relatives in the same community with the boys and girls, contributing so that more girls can express themselves through painting. And also, when I went to the United States, we can see here the students of the Art University. So I also shared my knowledge with them so that they can make their own sarwa boards, but with their own stories. And this is the last contest that I participated in at the ICPNA of Contemporary Arts, and I won. I won the contest at national level with the walking sticks, which are also traditionally only carried by men. And on those traditional sticks, I painted the stories of women. First, virgin women who are in relationship with nature, like mermaids singing. Then the stories of many women who don't talk about it, who don't say it. And what I mean is the physical, psychological, sexual, and economic violence. And so the black ones are the mermaids, and then the red ones are violence, the yellow ones empowered women, women who get involved in politics, the Indian women who ask for more women to organize themselves so that their voices can be heard in politics. And blue, in blue, we have the women who are being healed through the relationship with spirituality, with nature, Pachamama, the patron saint of Sarwa. And then with these sticks, I was able to obtain the Lima Prize in 2020 at a national level. And then let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. It was definitely very difficult for everyone worldwide, and even more for artists, since there were no spaces to exhibit, there were no spaces to show all of these interests. So here I painted my self-portrait, and the only source of information we could get was on social networks or on the internet. So you can see here, there's a face mask. And as you can see on the bottom, it's like the Facebook page because you have the like, comment, and share. Facebook is a social network that is widely used here. So I was inspired by skirts and textiles as well, a sublimated technique, hand painted but sublimated on fabric. And this was also a way to wear art on our faces and in the streets. And I still continue to portray stories like in the pandemic, women continue to disappear, continue to be killed, and in the provinces as well. So there I depict a mother crying for her missing daughter, asking, where is my daughter? Because so far she can't find her daughter. And there are so many cases where girls disappear. And in the other one, I have portrayed a Sarina woman. This is a photo that I had been given. It's black and white, where the Indian woman was all disheveled with very simple clothes on. So I empowered the woman, and at the same time, I showed a woman that is well dressed, her hair is done, and the baby is happy. She's showing her breast because it's normal to breastfeed a baby, and in some areas it's forbidden, but that is just feeding a baby. It's natural, it's good. So there I show a strong woman proudly showing her breast, which is a source of nourishment for her child. I kept painting the problems in our country, and in this case, how the state has been very unsupportive. So there are areas that don't receive any type of help, and the women have had to organize themselves. And there you can see that I have depicted kind of like a potluck, which was done a lot in the 80s and 90s, but it was replicated again in the pandemic. You can see the strength of the women, how they pull their families together in their neighborhoods, and they help them move forward. They all cook to be able to feed their families, especially the children. And then in the bottom is about a political situation that we went through that was very difficult. The population went out to march, demand to claim, but not with the intention of being killed. And these two young people were killed by the police in the march. So there's the pain of the mothers who in 1 second, they see their children saying, Mom, I'm going to a protest to demand my rights, and they never come back home. So this is the pain that mothers feel. And I'm a mother, and I wanted to capture and portray these two boys flying on a condor, carrying the Peruvian flag, because they wanted to demand their rights. But they didn't want to be assassinated. This is a way of remembering them and of reminding their mothers that they are martyrs for democracy in 2020, and that their sacrifice was not in vain. And I think then, well, we're here trying to reach some political stability and we're going to continue to try to get things right. I still continued with the murals. We were also supported by the Ministry of Culture and an institution, the UNDP, which financed these murals, where I was able to do them with the support of the Ministry of Culture and also in an area where we were able to portray the story of women of the community. And also, we had a gathering of Venezuelans and Peruvians, and they're moving forward in harmonious ways because sometimes we divide people depending on what country they're from, but in the end, we are all brothers and sisters, we're all humans. And the last thing I've done this year was all about textile proposals. I started using this. What you see here, the most colorful parts are inspired by the women's jackets. Sarwa's clothing is also inspired by surroundings, by the fauna and the flora. But textile art doesn't really have much value here. It isn't very valued. So what I wanted to do was to take it to the form of paintings, and that's exactly what I did with the flora and fauna. And then in the other part, you can see paintings that I paint on wood, but made with some embroidery on drill fabrics. And then there are also some stitches that I embroidered by hand. And the one in the middle is a piece of my grandparents' blanket, which my father wanted to throw away. I told him not to. So I took it, adapted it, washed it, cut it up, and said I'm going to make textile boards. So I started to embroider it by hand, and it became a traditional board. My idea is to continue with this textile art. And here's my little workshop that UNESCO and the Australian Embassy helped me with. It's my creative space. You can see a door here. That door is the door of my mother's business. She used to sell clothes. And on this board is her story. It's a story about migration, a story of strength. She's physically no longer with me, but her teachings stayed with me, and I'm making them come true. And I'm also passing them on to new generations. Okay, and that was all. Thank you so much. That was my short talk. Venuca, thank you so much. Wonderful. It was wonderful to hear from you. Yes, it was marvelous. Thank you very much. I have so many questions. Ask me, please. I tried to hurry up because of the time. I would like to ask the questions at the round table because I think this is a discussion that everyone can benefit from. I don't know, Pablo, what do you think? Yes, I think that we can separate some questions for the roundtable, but I would just like to ask you if you could maybe expand a little bit on something that seems unique to me about your practice is how you manage to put in one place, how you manage to synthesize a practice that has to do with a collective story or history of the community with the tradition. So, how do you combine the ancestral with formats that in some way you allow yourself to have more freedom? So you continue, you follow a tradition, but you also interrupt or question some things about that tradition at the same time. And I find that duality very interesting. For example, with the idea of gender and so on. One of the questions is, for example, when you work with issues of gender, women's empowerment, how is this perceived by people who also practice the tradition of Sarwa boards, but without approaching these issues? How do you relate to these people, or how is this received by the community? I would say that the work that shocked them the most was the Sarino eroticism. I don't know if I showed you the full image of the work in the gallery. But these are real stories that happen and they're not talked about. It's just a small part. But you can see two of them there. And one of them tells the real story of what women in the Sarwa community go through in the sexual sphere. Sometimes they're abused. No one cares about a woman's satisfaction or if they feel happy with their sexuality. And these sexual relationships take place at parties when people are drunk. I mean, how many girls that are 13, 14 years old are pregnant and don't even know who their father is, or the father leaves to go back to Lima or other areas and they don't take responsibility for the child. And these are realities that happen. I'm not making it up. I'm not inventing this. But I mean, it's about women claiming their sexual rights. I like this pose. I reached an orgasm. I enjoy this or that. And in the end, it's about sexual education where you can openly talk about these issues to have a better relationship between men and women, to have sexual health as well. Because sometimes women, especially here in the province, they don't talk about, for example, whether they have a vaginal infection or an issue. They don't say it because they're ashamed. And what's worse is that sometimes they have to say that they're virgins because if you're not a virgin, men don't really take you seriously. So, how long is that going to go on for? And I put that into words. And if it made them uncomfortable because they thought, how am I going to portray women like that? Sarwina women are not like that, but how long are we going to keep quiet? How long or how much longer before they say what they like and don't like? How much longer until they receive the support they need and the treatment they need? How much more can a woman take, right? So these are the stories that I want to show, and also the issues that have to do, for example, with homosexuality. That was the first topic that came up outside the traditional issues and topics that we portray. But sex life is also a custom, and I think it's normal between adults, between couples. And no one really said much or complained about this second point, my paintings with the homosexual motif. And as I said, there's a lot of sexism still. And Pablo, like I said, we work with the community, we create murals, we have workshops with the children, and in this case, the women carried the sarwa board, and it's not a tradition. The men usually do it. And we have to kind of get rid of this idea of what is normal. And we hope to continue contributing to the people, to the women themselves. And I'm very happy that women are already painting and showing themselves through the painting. Because before, sarwa boards were made by men and not by women. So in 2018, I was not only painting, but also encouraging more women to empower themselves here in Lima. And I have other cousins who are also doing this, who are focusing on gender issues. And there's a community, and this makes me happy. We're generating positive changes in the environment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Venuca. I'm going to set the rest of the questions aside for later.